you could be doing all of the right stuff and feeling really positive, and then someone could just make the smallest comment and it could just totally throw you off, derail your progress, maybe even stop you from continuing to make progress. Words have a lot of power over people. Hi, everyone, and happy Thanksgiving. Or, well, if you are in the U.S., happy Thanksgiving. If you are elsewhere, you may not even know what I'm talking about. But here in the U.S., every, I think, third Thursday in November, we celebrate Thanksgiving, which is really a holiday about food and family, as most are, right? But some holidays are more family-centered than others. And this is a very family-centered holiday. This time of year specifically, especially as we're approaching Christmas and Hanukkah, there's just more family events that tend to take place, more gatherings of friends and family. And when there's more gatherings of friends and family, there's usually food involved. And what, of course, follows are comments about our kids eating. And that could really trigger us as parents. And, that's what we're going to talk about today. And I think this is such an important topic because, you could be doing all of the right stuff and feeling really positive, and then someone could just make the smallest comment and it could just totally throw you off, derail your progress, maybe even stop you from continuing to make progress. Words have a lot of power over people. And it's really important to, I think, talk about this, bring this up before the holidays really get into full swing, because there is definitely things that you can do to make this go better. So if in the past you were always sort of worried about that someone was going to comment on your child's eating, or that, they were going to make you or the child feel badly with something that they might say, and you're just kind of like hoping and praying that they're not going to make that comment this time around, because you don't want it to ruin your whole day or the whole holiday. So that's what we're going to dive into today. And I have a lot of great suggestions for you. So if you are new to the channel, I give out lots of tips. My podcast comes out every Monday, so please take a moment now to subscribe so you don't miss anything. Every week I have new tips and strategies for you and for your picky eater to help make meal times go more smoothly. And not just that, I love focusing on making the meals as nutrient dense as possible and optimizing, getting in as many vitamins and all of the good things as possible. So if that resonates with you, definitely check us out, subscribe, and visit us at foodologyfeeding.com. But let's just dive right in. So, I really want you to first, before we get into, and I have about, five strategies that I'm going to give you that you can specifically use for this week. But before we get there, I want to talk about sort of how to solve the problem long term. And you might think that, oh, well, that's just, we just have to get over this picky eating little thing and the comments will go away. But oftentimes, it's not even just the picky eating. People that are going to make comments, they'll find something else to make comments about. So this is actually more about how to deal with just general comments that upset you. So, long term, there is, I would say, a solution, but it will take some work. So I'm going to present you with that first, a long term, and then we're going to get into, well, what can I do this week? If that's like a long-term goal, what am I going to do in a couple of days? So we are going to go into both of those, just so you know. Now, Um, so what to say when your family asks you or makes a comment about your picky eater? Well, before we even get into what to do, I want you to think about what you would like them to say. Like if you don't want them to make whatever comment, what do you want them to say? What do you want the conversation to look and sound like? How do you want to feel at the end of that conversation? And this is something that we talk about a lot, when we talk about manifesting, visualizing. So I want you to visualize in your mind's eye having the conversation that you really wish you can have. And maybe that conversation is sort of telling them off, or maybe it's just a pleasant conversation where there's no belittling or making you feel bad or making your child feel bad. Maybe it's just a nice conversation. So, what do you kind of want it to look like? What do you want it to sound like? And how do you want to feel at the end of it? That's the biggest part. How do you want to feel at the end of it? Do you want to walk away from that conversation like, oh, wow, that went really good. That felt good, versus those cringy conversations that I'm sure you've had at some point that just left you feeling icky and upset. And, we're going to get into all of that. But first, I want you to put into your mind that ideal conversation. Right? Because that's kind of our goal. That's our intent. That's what we're working towards, right? So the clearer you can make that picture in your mind with as many details as possible, and actually bringing up the feelings that you want to feel will give you the best shot of getting as close to that as possible, especially if you try this more than once. So I wouldn't just do this exercise once and done. I would do this actually every day leading up to the holiday where you're going to be with these people. Like, especially if this is a big problem for you and it's caused issues with your family, between family members in the past or between friends in the past. This is definitely something I would recommend doing multiple times. So first, what does that look like, right? Then I want you to think, so we're going to go into like how to fix this long term, right? So long term, this is called the inner work. So inner work takes time, which is why I'm going to give you suggestions after this about exactly what you can do short term in the moment, because there are, of course, things you can do. But what is triggering you about these comments? And this is going to take some soul searching and exploring. So, like, for example, if they say, is she still just eating those snacks? Like sort of like snide. Maybe it's the tone of voice. Maybe they didn't actually say anything wrong, but it's how they said it. And you know exactly what I'm talking about. But I want you to think about and write down would be the ideal. But why does that comment or the way or the tone, why does that bother you? Have you ever stopped to think about it? And I want you to go deep. So take a moment to lean into that feeling and feel, how does it make you feel? Does it make you feel angry? Do you feel, like they were belittling you? Are you actually mad or are you sad? Like, have you actually teased out those emotions and those feelings? Because there is something to it. Things don't trigger us unless, there's some piece of it that is bothering us. And usually it comes from something that might have happened in our childhood. But, a lot of times I feel the triggering feeling, and I don't want to speak for everyone here, but sometimes it seems to be more of a reflection on our performance as parents. And or it could be related to feelings of our self-worth, right? So identifying those feelings is going to be really key to sort of unlocking and unraveling everything, right? So this is that inner work. This is the step one that we really want to explore to sort of make these family gatherings actually pleasant once and for all, because it really stinks to have to do all this, fun holiday stuff and, putting on like a face for our kids, and really inside you're hating the day, you're dreading it because you don't want to have these conversations with people. But like doing some of this inner work, like that is a way out of this in many ways, and you might not fix everything about what they're saying. It's not like you're going to be able to control what people say necessarily, but your reaction and feelings about what they're saying can change that, right? So that might be our goal, right? Is that, your mother-in-law might still say those things, but they don't have to ruin your day. They don't have to make you feel awful. And you can actually still enjoy your holiday, right? That is what we're going for here. When we're talking about fixing this long term. Now, let's see, did I miss anything here that I just put some bullet points down. I did mention that this often comes from things in our childhood, right? Everything goes back to childhood, right? Ask any psychologist. Everything does seem to go back to childhood. But, when we're talking about these types of things, were you ever made to feel like you weren't good enough, right? Because if you weren't, that comment might trigger that feeling to come back. And it's an unresolved feeling, and that's why it's called a trigger, because it's still there, waiting for you to resolve it. And that inner work will take time. So you can see today is the Monday before Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving's on Thursday. You're not going to resolve these issues just, in a couple days, no big deal. Like sometimes it could take a couple weeks, months for you to really work through these feelings. And everyone is so different. So some people might work through them much faster than others. And sometimes, like I said, were you ever made to feel like you weren't good enough? One or two things might come to mind, but the more you work on it, you might be like, oh, wow. There were like 10 things actually, and things I didn't initially think of, but then things that came to mind later on. Right. So, and this stuff it's tough, but the inner work stuff is the most transformative. It's the most life-changing. It's, the things that end up, changing our lives for the better and making us more joyful and happy and, enjoying things, honestly, much more than we were. So, definitely highly recommend that you try some of these things, writing them down, thinking about them during a quiet time, maybe like not in the car on your way to the holiday. But I like to do things like at night. Some people do really early in the morning when everything is quiet, kids are asleep, there's no one specifically demanding your attention. That's a good time to be reflective. So, or sometimes people in the car while they're driving, if you're driving by yourself to or from work, you can be reflective then as well. That's just some ideas. So, okay, let's jump into the short-term strategies. So I have 5. So let's do number 1. Having responses ready to go, like on the tip of your tongue. The worst, I feel like it's not the worst, but personally, I feel like one of the worst things is when someone says something to you and you don't have a good answer back and you're just like, like, what do I say? and this happens to my husband a lot actually, and it bothers him so much. Mostly when the two of us, if we're in an argument or something, and he's like, oh, you always have something to say, and I never have anything good to say in the moment. I always think of something later on. So if that is you, if that is like, oh my gosh, I never have a good answer and I just feel like an idiot, or I feel awful. I created a list of 45 different phrases you can say that just, look it over right before you go into that holiday situation, and, just have something on the tip of your tongue ready to go. Now, if you want to get this, you can get it on our website, or you can DM or comment on Instagram the word turkey, TURKEY, to get this freebie. And it is an awesome freebie. So if you're like, I never know what to say about this, download that freebie and you will be set for like every holiday, every family event for like years. So definitely check that out. But having something ready to go is great. But the next thing, right after you say that go-to phrase, I want you to redirect the conversation entirely to something else. So, now when I learned this strategy through a woman called Denise Duffield Thomas, she writes books and she helps entrepreneurs and with a money mindset, but she called it bean dipping. And I can't think of a more perfect word for it, especially when we're talking about holiday meals. So what is it? The strategy is essentially you're going to redirect. You're going to say your response and then go, oh, have you tried the bean dip? Like basically offering them to try this other thing. Just basically taking the conversation in a totally new turn. It doesn't have to be bean dip, of course. It could be a different dip, obviously, or it could be something totally different. You can ask them about their job, about their child, about their trip they have planned, like literally anything. People like to talk about themselves. So if you ask them something about themselves or some project or thing they have going on, that's a great way to redirect the flow of the conversation away from you, your child, a problem, into something new. Now, of course, this can work for many things. It doesn't have to even be related to picky eating for this to work. So, right, that's our first one. Have a response ready and redirect them, changing the subject. Now, my second tip is actually for your picky eater. This is just bringing some of their preferred foods. Okay, so if you know they're not going to eat anything, there's no point in having a meltdown. Now, I always bring a few snacks pretty much everywhere I go. I know some moms, they have like a bag full of goodies at all times. I don't have like a bag full of goodies, but I do have a couple of, dried snacks, dried goods that we can always go to, wherever we are. So, maybe thinking of putting a couple of things that aren't going to spoil into, your child's diaper bag or your bag, and just having them so that there's something to keep them from becoming hangry. Now, another tip I have is, they can eat before you leave. They can eat right after you leave, right? So if like something that you're absolutely dreading is pulling out a different food because you're afraid that is going to spark the comments, you don't have to feed them the food in front of anyone. You can pull them into a different room, be like, hey, I just want you to have a quick snack before you go back and play. So no one's seeing. Or you can feed them before they go into the party and right after. So having that food, bringing that food with you in the car can help you alleviate and avoid maybe some of those uncomfortable conversations altogether, or just kind of keep the kids, get kind of happy getting through that day without the stress and the tears. Thanksgiving, any holiday, honestly, any holiday, it's not the time to practice these strategies that we're talking with, are making food fun, meal prep. It's a day that is stressful enough because you got to get everything together. You don't want to forget anything. There's people coming over, in our house, we're always like cleaning the house and, making sure everything like looks nice, like right before people are coming. And it's always been a very high stress day. It's fun, but it's also high stress, at least for our family. That's obviously not for everyone. But the point is that it's not the time to also like bring them into the kitchen to do meal prep. Like that's just probably going to add to everyone's stress level. So I would avoid doing any of our strategies that day. Honestly, like just make the day about the day, the holiday, and leave the strategies for the day after. You can maybe work with some of the foods after, like, leftovers. That would be great, actually. You can even, ask, if they see, little Johnny, he's not eating, what's that about? And you could say, oh, you know what? He ate a big lunch before we came over. He was super hungry, kids. Do you want to can you just pack up a little bit so we can try some later? I'd love for him to try your, grandma's homemade casserole or, famous dip or whatever it is. So that's a great way to avoid that. Just saving some for later. And then you can actually, if you're not lying, you can actually use that to practice the strategies that we teach you, right? So that's a good one. You can also prep kids ahead of time, especially the younger ones who might not even really know what to expect. Like maybe they're 3 or 4 or 2 even, who knows. And, you can introduce them to some of the foods ahead of time that might be there. A lot of stores will have, like around this time of year, traditional foods that you would normally see on the holiday that you can just get like small amounts of ahead of time. That might be a good way to introduce them to it. And that's ahead of time in your own meal prep. Maybe you're even prepping for the holiday. Like maybe you're cooking something to bring to a holiday meal. They can help you maybe with that meal prep, or you can be introducing things then. Talking about it, looking at pictures or videos ahead of time, all good strategies and suggestions that, we don't have to do. But, if you really want the kids to be involved and in the holiday in some way, shape, or form, any sort of prep will be beneficial. Even if it's just, again, having them transfer from one bowl to another, or helping you scoop something in, or, handing you the package of the Brussels sprouts or whatever it is. That's a good way, and you could just talk about it like, oh, this is something that we're going to have on the table that everyone's going to be eating. So, a lot of kids will be happy to help with that, even if they're not willing to eat it. And I would totally accept their help. And if you don't want them to help with the whole thing, maybe have them just do 1 or 2 pieces, make them feel really proud and be like, great, you helped me. We're all done. Go play, have fun. Right. So, they can kind of get in their experience, and then you can finish the rest. So you can kind of do a little bit of both. Let's see what else. Okay. So we have so far having your responses ready, bringing prepared foods, practicing ahead of time. And now I want you to go in, number 4, with a positive mindset. So, anything can happen on a holiday. I'd say kids can go one of two ways. So sometimes when they're exposed to new foods and they're in an environment where they see other kids or even other adults eating different foods, it might, if they are relaxed enough, their nervous system, if they're regulated enough, they may actually try some new foods on a holiday and surprise the heck out of you. So that could happen. And you should definitely be open to that as a possibility, and be excited for that possibility. It definitely could happen. But it could also go the other way. You can bring their preferred foods and they might not eat anything. And why? Because their nervous system, they're just overstimulated and they can't even get it together for their favorite foods, let alone a new food, right? So it can really go either way. And, there's no telling, because sometimes when you get to a party, maybe who's going to be there, maybe what to expect, but a lot of things are out of our control on days like this. Traffic, weather, sometimes, who gets there, but they're in a bad mood and that affects other people. You know what I mean? Like, there's just so many factors that it's really going to be hard to determine which picky eater you're going to get. You're going to get the curious one who decides all of a sudden that he's going to try 3 new foods, or the one that won't even eat the, one preferred food that he eats every day. So I would just be open to it, though. Just be open to whatever it is. It's going to be what it is. And I think when you have no expectations, I think that could be a positive mindset, is having no expectations. Because sometimes when you go in being like, okay, I've packaged his favorite sandwich, his favorite snacks, we're going to eat it in the car, and you try to control all of these little pieces, sometimes that could contribute to you having an unpleasant time. Because if something doesn't go according to your expectations, you're going to be disappointed, and that might affect your time. So I would go in, a hopeful optimist with no expectations, saying, hey, whatever happens, we're going to have a good time. I brought some stuff here. Eat it if you want. Don't eat it if you don't want. We're going to have fun. We're here to have fun. We're here to have a good time. We're here to be together. We're here to see people. Okay, that's our goal. So when you make that the focus and not the food, you'll probably have a much more pleasant holiday. Okay, now my last tip is, and this could be a tricky one, but don't talk about issues in front of your child, or try your hardest to avoid it. Right? Sometimes it's impossible because grandma is literally shouting across the room, but I would try my hardest to not bring up food issues, good or bad, in front of them. Because we don't want, let's go back just for a minute to our long-term solution to this problem, right? Didn't I say everything sort of stems from things that happen in their childhood, feelings that came about when you were a child because of things that people said or did. So sometimes, even if you think they're not listening, here's a great example. The other day, we were talking about, now I can't even remember, but we were talking about maybe something my son was coloring or whatever it was. It wasn't like a negative. It was just, we were talking about things that happened that day. And I didn't think he was listening because he was, I don't know, playing with a toy or whatever. He was silent. And then all of a sudden he heard like a word that sparked his interest and he joined in on the conversation. And I was like, oh my God, he was listening that whole time, wasn't he? And whoever I was talking to was like, oh yeah, he was. He heard everything. And I just remembered where I was when it happened. But they're keeping notes and they have feelings, and they're going to have a hard time processing, especially if you didn't even know if they heard it or not, right? If you're thinking they didn't hear something and they did, and they don't say anything about it, it's going to be hard to like sort of help them navigate those feelings, right? Like, oh, they might not say, oh, grandma made me feel sad because, she doesn't think that I'm doing a good enough job eating. Like, am I doing a bad job, mom? Like that would like break my heart. So we don't want to talk about things about food in front of our kids, even if they're good things. I would just sort of leave it off the table. Like, don't bring a lot of importance to it. Even if you're like, oh yes, we've been in feeding therapy and now, Jennifer eats 12 new foods since we've last seen you, right, Jennifer? That kind of almost makes it seem like the food is almost like more important. Like, oh wow, well, I guess like the more foods I eat, the more that grandma will love me, right? Now, of course, that's not true. Like, we know that that's not true, but we can't like totally control how kids interpret things and think about things. So yeah, they might very well take it to mean that that's what that means. So we don't want to talk about any food issues in front of kids, good or bad. I would just leave it off the table, literally. I came up with that on the fly. I didn't even realize. But yeah, leave it off the table completely. Just focus on other things. Like, one of the parenting tips that I really have tried to adopt very hard is not even talking about, it's been advised that we don't praise kids for being intelligent over praising them for how hard they're trying or how hard they're working on something, because it's been shown that kids, like there's studies that show that when you talk about like their basically like their grades, like, oh, you got this grade or you got this many right, versus, wow, you worked really hard to figure that out. Like the group of kids that was told that they worked really hard to figure that out actually ended up excelling and doing better on tests than the kids that were just given that more intelligent praise. So I just in general try to adopt this general statements of things like, oh, wow, you tried really hard on that, or you're doing a great job working on that, or, oh, it seems like you're really enjoying this project, right? So just like sort of be more general overall. So, food aside, sometimes people use the holidays as an excuse to, brag or whatever. And, that I don't know if I totally agree with doing that. I don't know if that's a good time, especially like, again, not in front of the kids. We don't want to make them think that that's what's most important or that that's how they earn your love. That, we want them to know that you're going to love them no matter what happens, no matter what grade they get, no matter how many friends they have or how many foods they've eaten, that it's just unconditional, right? I remember I went back to this specific comment that, are you getting triggered because you were ever made to feel like you weren't good enough, right? Well, we don't want to repeat that for our kids if we can help it. We don't want them to feel like they weren't good enough because they didn't try enough foods, that they weren't eating enough foods, that they weren't getting good enough grades, that they didn't have a certain number of friends, or that they didn't score a certain number of goals, right? So Just something to think about. Just thoughts, just thoughts for you to think about. And I'd love to know your thoughts. So, please let me know. Feel free to email us, or you can DM on Instagram or in the comments on YouTube. I'd love to hear, what strategies you took away from this. And if, after the holidays, please come back. Let me know, how did these strategies work for you? How did the phrase list work for you? Be sure you check out that download. I don't know if it'll always be available, so it's good to get while you can. So, DM or comment Turkey, or you can find it on our website as well under resources. And we will see you again next week for more fun. Make sure, if you haven't already, subscribe, rate, and review. It really helps people find the channel and get the help that they need. So thanks so much, and have a great day.
Thank you for listening to How to Unpicky Your Picky Eater. To learn more about achieving your child's feeding goals, check out Christine's website at foodologyfeeding.com. And be sure to tune in next time to How to Unpicky Your Picky Eater.